Tell me this. This is a company truck, and they're having you drive around the country to find parts.
No, I mean, that's just this time, I mean, it was going fine.
2 men were arrested, but prosecutors are looking to upgrade the charges now to include drug trafficking just because of the sheer amount of drugs that were found.
At a quiet Texas truck stop, officers pulled over a truck that looked completely ordinary. The paperwork listed electronics. The trailer seals looked clean. Then the doors opened and the whole story fell apart. Hidden behind the legal freight were hundreds of kilograms of methamphetamine and fentanyl. Within minutes, the driver was in handcuffs. But that single bust quickly triggered alarms inside the FBI and DEA. Phone records, money transfers, and shipping logs began to connect, exposing a $2.8 billion cartel system spread across 47 truck stops across 18 states. And if a network that huge was moving in plain sight, who was quietly keeping it alive day after day? The bust that started it all. The truck stop looked normal. It sat beside a quiet Texas highway, and nothing about it seemed dangerous. The cargo papers listed electronics. The seals on the trailer doors looked untouched. The driver stayed calm. Then one small detail changed the mood. The route did not make sense. The timing felt wrong. The load was supposed to be simple, but the truck had made stops that did not match the clean story in the paperwork. When the trailer doors finally opened, rows of boxed freight sat inside, stacked like ordinary cargo. At first glance, it still looked like electronics. But behind the legal freight, hidden where a quick look would miss it, officers found the packages that broke the whole story apart. There were hundreds of kilograms of methamphetamine and fentanyl packed deep inside the load. The drugs were sealed, stacked, and hidden, with the kind of care that told officers this was not some desperate driver taking a reckless chance. Whoever packed that trailer understood inspections. They understood how to make something deadly look like one more shipment moving through the American road system. To cartel operatives, truck driving offered access to a transportation network that stretches from coast to coast, with minimal scrutiny. Every day, millions of tons of perfectly legal goods travel on America's interstate highways. Consumer products, food supplies, and industrial materials, from the packed racks of Chicago to the distribution hubs of Los Angeles. A sprawling system of highways and truck stops moves the nation's economy. In fact, over 70% of all freight in the United States is transported by truck. A figure so large, it makes this mode of transport one of the busiest logistical arteries in the world. Because of the staggering scale, agents realized that a cartel could hide in plain sight simply by folding its operations into the ordinary flow of commerce. Within minutes, the driver was out of the cab. His name was Robert Chen. He did not look like the kind of man people expect to see at the center of a cartel case. He looked like a tired long-haul driver who had spent too many nights behind a windshield and too many mornings waking up in parking lots. There was no gold chain, no armed crew, no dramatic escape attempt, no cartel symbol. Just one man standing beside a trailer that had suddenly become a crime scene. Officers cuffed him on the asphalt. The first search of the cab moved fast. Phones were taken, receipts were pulled together, delivery papers were bagged. Route notes were separated from the normal clutter of a working truck. Fuel stops, message times, pickup points, and delivery windows began to matter. At first, Chen tried to keep the story small. He said he had only followed orders. He said the load had been handed to him like any other job. He said he did not know everything inside the trailer. He gave the kind of answers a driver gives when he hopes the blame will stop at the cargo doors. But the questions kept coming. Then the story cracked in a different way. Chen spoke about pickup points missing from the paperwork. He mentioned drop-off windows that sounded too exact for a normal delivery. He admitted that certain messages arrived before certain stops. He talked about payments that did not match the clean freight job written on the forms. Chen knew pieces, but he did not know who controlled the whole path. He did not know where the hidden cargo was supposed to end after Texas. The records backed him up just enough to make everything worse. Fuel receipts placed him where he said he had stopped. Phone activity lined up with parts of the route. The truck's movement record showed a driver staying inside the law just enough to avoid attention. By the end of the first round of questioning, the case had changed shape. The drugs were no longer the only discovery. Chen's route had become the real evidence. Someone had given him instructions. Someone had timed the pickup. Someone had expected that trailer to leave Texas and keep moving. That was the beginning of what investigators would later call Operation Iron Highway. The network across America. Chen did not give agents the whole machine. He gave them the first path into it. The first path began with fuel receipts. Then came phone contacts, delivery papers, toll records, and truck movement logs. Each item looked small on its own. A fuel stop in Texas, a short call before sunrise, a delivery window that seemed normal, a name on a freight form that had no reason to stand out. But when agents placed the records beside one another, the same locations kept coming back. One stop appeared twice. Then it appeared beside another driver's route. Then another truck showed a similar pattern hundreds of miles away. The case moved from one trailer to a map. Investigators began marking every stop connected to Chen's route. The marks did not stay in Texas. They pushed west, north, and east, following the same major highways used by ordinary freight every day. The pattern stretched across Interstate 10, then tied into Interstate 40, then reached the long path of Interstate 80. What first looked like one strange delivery began spreading across the country. By the time the map filled out, the number was hard to ignore. 47 truck stops, 18 states, not hidden camps, not abandoned warehouses, not fenced compounds in the desert, public truck stops. That was what made the map so disturbing. Nothing about the outside looked criminal. The businesses had licenses, they had employees, they sold fuel all day. They had repair tickets, food sales, tax records, and regular customers who had no idea what was moving around them. Truck stops already run through the night. Drivers already arrive at strange hours. Trailers already sit for long stretches. One rig pulling in after midnight does not matter when dozens of others are parked beside it. A driver waiting near the edge of the lot does not look strange. A trailer staying longer than expected can be blamed on rest time, repairs, paperwork, or a late pickup. That ordinary movement gave the network room to breathe. At one stop, a trailer sat near a repair bay for almost the same length of time on 3 separate nights. At another, fuel charges appeared under one company name while the trailer tied back to another. At a third, the same contact number showed up before 2 different drivers arrived in the same week. Each detail was easy to explain alone. Together, they looked arranged. As investigators followed the records, money started giving the map a second shape. Small payments showed up near certain delivery windows. Freight records carried names that repeated too often. Some charges made sense until they were matched against the route. Then they became part of a larger count. Shipment after shipment. Stop after stop. Load after load. The estimated value climbed until it reached $2.8 billion. That number changed the room. This was no longer a question of how one truck ended up carrying a hidden load. It was a question of how many loads had passed through the same quiet spaces before anyone noticed. The 47 stops were not random dots on a highway map. They were transfer points, placed inside the normal flow of American freight. And if those stops were connected, one problem stood above everything else. How could cargo move through 18 states without one driver seeing the whole trip? The cartel's truck relay. The cartel did not let one driver carry a full load across the country. That was the rule that kept the system alive. No driver got the whole route. No driver saw every stop. No driver knew how many hands would touch it before it reached the final buyer. One man took the load a few hundred miles. Another took the next stretch. A third picked it up after that. The trip was broken into small legs that looked normal on paper. To law enforcement, each truck looked like ordinary freight moving between ordinary stops. To the cartel, each truck was only one handoff in a much longer chain. The process repeated again and again. A trailer would arrive at a truck stop carrying what looked like legal cargo. The driver would park in a normal space, near other rigs, under the same lights, beside the same fuel lanes. Inside that normal movement, the hidden cargo was passed forward. Packages buried behind legal freight were removed, shifted, or prepared for another trailer. Sometimes the cargo stayed under the same cover. Sometimes it moved into a different load that already had clean paperwork waiting. Another driver would leave the stop, believing he had started a new job, not continued a criminal route that had already crossed several hands before him. If a driver was stopped, the damage stayed small. He could give investigators his pickup point, his delivery window, and maybe one contact number. He could not give them the full path because he did not have it. If his phone was seized, it showed only a few names. If his truck was taken, the next load could still move somewhere else. Every failure was built to look isolated. That was why earlier arrests had not exposed the network. One driver caught with drugs looked like one smuggling case. One trailer found with hidden packages looked like one bad shipment. One route between two states looked too short to prove a national system. The real shape only appeared when agents stopped looking at single arrests and started placing many records together. Then the pattern became impossible to ignore. The same time windows appeared at different stops. The same short messages came before arrivals. The same kind of delays happened before handoffs. The cartel had turned the highway into a relay race. Money moved through separate hands. Instructions came through short calls or brief messages. Some contacts never touched the drugs. Some people handled payments without ever seeing a trailer. If one piece broke, the others could still survive. If one truck stop drew attention, the next route could shift. If one trailer disappeared into evidence, another driver could be sent through another stop. The system had been designed to absorb damage. And somewhere above all those fragments, someone still had to see the full board. If the relay was built so that no driver ever saw the full route, one question still stood out. How did the cartel keep so many drivers moving in silence for so long? How drivers got trapped. As the investigation widened, agents began to see that the most important part of the network was not the trailer, the hidden cargo, or the truck stop lot. It was the people behind the wheel. Many of them were not hardened criminals. They were ordinary drivers caught at the worst point in their lives, pulled in when money was tight, and walking away already felt impossible. Some had lost steady contracts. Some were buried under truck payments, fuel bills, repairs, medical debt, divorce costs, or family pressure. Others were independent drivers living from one job to the next, trying to keep their rigs moving because one bad month could destroy everything they had built. That was where the recruiters entered. They did not arrive with threats at first. They came quietly, often through someone the driver already knew or someone who sounded like a normal broker. The offer was simple. One short run, no questions, fast cash. The driver did not have to cross the country. He did not have to meet a boss. He only had to move a sealed trailer from one stop to another and keep his mouth shut. For a desperate driver, it did not always look like a cartel job at the beginning. It looked like relief. The first trip was usually small, a few hundred miles, a normal highway, a regular truck stop, a trailer that looked clean from the outside, no police stop, no alarm, no angry voice on the phone. Then the payment came, exactly as promised. That was how the trap started closing. After one run became two, and two became more, the driver was no longer a stranger to the system. He had taken the money, he had followed the messages, he had helped move cargo that he was never supposed to ask about. And once that happened, the tone changed. The offer became pressure. Drivers who hesitated started hearing things they were not supposed to hear. A wife's name, a home address, the school a child attended, the time someone usually leaves the house. The message was never complicated. The people behind the loads knew where they lived, and they knew how to make refusing feel more dangerous than continuing. At that point, the job was no longer just about money. It was fear. Some drivers later admitted they had made more than 40 runs over several years. Each trip was short enough to look routine. Each stop felt like just another piece of freight work. But the pressure behind it kept growing. The drivers did not need to know the full system to be controlled by it. They only needed to know what might happen if they stopped answering. The system is brutal and efficient. New drivers could be recruited quietly. Old drivers could be pushed harder, scared into silence, or dropped when they became a risk. If one driver disappeared into custody, another one could take his place. If one man asked too many questions, the next man might be too desperate to ask any. But the drivers were not the last layer. As agents dug deeper into financial records, seized phones, and route documents, other names began to appear. Truck stop managers, bookkeepers, contractors. People who were not behind the wheel, but still seemed to know when certain trailers arrived, when they left, and which movements needed to be ignored. The truck stop insiders. Once investigators moved past the people behind the wheel, the case entered a more dangerous phase. The timing was too clean. The same lots kept appearing. The same trailers arrived during the same quiet windows. Drivers were not choosing all of that on their own. Someone inside the truck stops was helping the machine run. The first break came from the calls. At first, many of them sounded harmless. A manager talked about a delayed delivery. Someone mentioned a repair bay. Another call shifted a driver to a different parking area. On the surface, it sounded like ordinary truck stop work. Freight gets delayed, trucks need repairs, parking spaces change. Nothing about those words sounded criminal by itself. But when agents placed the calls beside trailer movement, the meaning changed. A delayed delivery matched the arrival of a hidden load. A repair note lined up with a trailer that was not being repaired at all. A parking change put one truck close to another at the exact time a handoff was expected. What looked like normal business talk was being used to move illegal cargo without saying the real thing out loud. The managers were not just looking away. Some were directing the operation. They adjusted schedules when the wrong people were around. They held trailers longer than the paperwork required. They moved drivers into certain parts of the lot. They made sure regular employees stayed busy at the front counter, the fuel lanes, or the service desk, while the wrong trailer sat in the right place at the right time. Everything suspicious was wrapped inside things that happened at truck stops every day. Then investigators found the paper trail. It was buried inside boring records, repair bills that did not match the work done, fuel charges tied to odd timing, contractor names that appeared across different locations, cash deposits that looked small alone, but strange when lined up across several stops, invoices that seemed normal until they were matched with the movement of certain trailers. Handwritten logs sat beside digital spreadsheets. Short notes tracked arrivals, delays, and trailer changes. Some entries used plain words that meant nothing, until agents compared them with phone records and driver movement. The system did not look messy. It looked organized, almost like a real freight company tracking deliveries. That was the most disturbing part. The people running the network were not guessing. They were watching time, routes, drivers, and volume. If one driver was late, someone noticed. If one trailer sat too long, someone corrected it. If one route drew attention, another route could take over. The operation was not built around speed. It was built around control. The routes made that clear. Interstate 10, Interstate 40, and Interstate 80 were not chosen by accident. They carried heavy traffic across long parts of the country. They passed through busy freight areas, desert stretches, farming regions, industrial towns, and major city links. On roads like that, a trailer is never alone for long. A rig pulling in late at night looks normal when 20 others are already parked nearby. A driver walking across the lot looks normal when dozens of drivers are doing the same thing. A manager changing a schedule looks normal when schedules change all the time. That cover made the system hard to break. And because the stops were legal businesses, they had the perfect mask. The deeper agents went, the more the same names kept appearing. Managers, bookkeepers, contractors, dispatch contacts. People who did not all touch the drugs, but helped the drugs keep moving. By then, the plan was no longer to follow the network. The plan was to hit it before it could warn itself. The fall of the highway network. The investigators had already seen how the system protected itself. One driver could be replaced. One stop could go quiet for a few days while another one took over. If agents moved too slowly, the whole chain would sense danger and disappear into the same highways that had hidden it for years. So the strike had to land everywhere at once. Warrants were prepared across multiple states. Teams were placed near selected truck stops before the first doors opened. Evidence crews were ready for offices, trailers, storage rooms, phones, computers, and paper files. Local officers were brought in where needed, but the timing stayed tight. No warning call could move ahead of the raid. The plan became Operation Iron Highway. When the order finally came, it hit in a narrow window across the map. Federal agents moved on truck stops that, only hours earlier, still looked like ordinary places for fuel, food, showers, and sleep. Doors opened. Managers were detained. Drivers were pulled from cabs. Phones were taken before messages could be erased. Computers were seized before files could be deleted. Office drawers, storage rooms, repair areas, and parked trailers were searched before anyone inside the chain could clean up what had been left behind. The network had been built to survive pressure, but not pressure from every side at the same time. At some stops, agents found records that matched the routes they had been tracking for months. At others, they found phones tied to short messages and hidden contacts. In offices, they found paperwork that no longer looked harmless when placed beside the seized routes. In trailers and storage areas, they found the cargo that proved the case had never been about one truck in Texas. Methamphetamine, fentanyl, cocaine, heroin. The drugs had been hidden in places that looked ordinary from the outside. Trailers, back rooms, transfer points. Loads that could pass as normal freight until the search went deep enough. The same system that had made the operation hard to see now helped reveal how wide it had become. Every seized phone, every paper file, every shipping note, and every hidden package added another piece to the same picture. More than 2,800 federal agents were tied to the strike. 47 truck stops were hit across 18 states. The operation that once looked like scattered freight movements now stood exposed as a $2.8 billion system built inside the road network itself. The first arrests did not end the case. They opened the next phase. As agents worked through the phones, bank records, company papers, and route files, more names surfaced. Drivers who had moved short legs, recruiters who had brought them in, managers who had controlled parking lots and schedules, bookkeepers who had cleaned up payments, contractors and support players who had helped the system keep moving without touching every load themselves. The arrest count grew through follow-up phases until nearly 9,400 people were tied to the operation. The case forced hard questions about how legal businesses could be bent into criminal platforms. Truck stops were built to support movement, not to watch every trailer like a suspect. Highways were built to keep the country supplied, not to sort clean freight from hidden poison in every parked rig. The same freedom that made the system useful had also made it vulnerable. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.